Now, for a closer look at Netflix's deal in China, I'm joined by Wang, the founder and principal analyst at Constellation Research. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thank you. So let's start by first looking at the licensing deal between Netflix and iQIYI. Is this the only way Netflix could really get into the Chinese market?
It is probably one of the few ways it could get in. It definitely needed a strong Chinese partner. That's part of the process. And more importantly, I think for Netflix, the cost of actually jumping into the market without any regulatory certainty was too great, and that risk was too great for them to go forward.
So a real temptation there. Now, iQIYI says it has more than 20 million subscribers, but does that translate into dollars, though, for Netflix?
It does actually, and I think if the numbers are correct, there's 500 million people that use the service and 20 million that actually paid. And with better content, we're actually seeing better conversion rates in general. And more importantly, there's a voracious appetite for American content at the moment. They might not necessarily get House of Cards, which looks at corruption in politics, but what they might get is some of the other content that Netflix is putting together. In fact, they're spending about $6 to $7 billion on content this year, which is up almost double from what it was about 2 to 3 years ago.
And to your point about some of the edginess of some of the shows on Netflix, how do they go about either adapting or perhaps changing the content to make sure that it doesn't violate any laws in China?
Well, I think that's where a good partner comes into play. I think there's going to be a little bit of testing of what shows work. And the beauty of digital distribution is you know exactly which shows are flop right away. Like, was it downloaded? Are people commenting about it on WeChat? Are people talking about these shows in other ways? And that's really part of what you want to be able to do.
And how do you think this deal will help Netflix fund production of more of its original programming?
Well, part of the digital distribution model is the ability to understand what topics are of interest, what shows people are interested in. And the more you can put this together, you'll start to say, hey, maybe more family-oriented shows are interesting, more rom-coms, maybe more sci-fi pictures or releases, maybe more of Netflix's original content is taking hold. And so I think they're going to use that to test the waters, do some A to X testing, and find out what works, what gets people excited, and then adjust as they need. Now, that's where Baidu comes in, where they can figure out, and iQIYI can figure out what do they need to do to come and figure out, what shows are hitting the mark, what shows need to be created, what type of demand. There's also data from their existing users as to what shows also work. So they can come up with the right formula, like the way they took on Brazil, like the way they took on other countries.
So we've covered what Netflix is getting out of this, but what about iQIYI? What are the main things that they're getting out of this deal?
Well, they have access to some of the premium content capabilities Netflix is bringing to bear. And more importantly, it gives them an American partner, which may work both ways in distribution. You're seeing a lot of content creation these days being done both from China and Hollywood. That partnership continues to move forward. And we're seeing that happen across, even with the Amazons, the Netflixes, even Disney. A lot of folks are actually working at these content deals, not just in the creation, but also distribution. And we're seeing these worlds come back together again in the digital world.
And it's certainly a competitive market. So what sort of edge could this deal give it over rivals, say, from Alibaba, Tencent, and others?
Well, I think Alibaba will be looking at other deals. I think Apple wants to be in this space in the long run. I think, if you think about Tencent, all these companies want to be able to create these cross-border deals, not just in content, but the American content market is the richest. It's also the content market that has the most possibility for expansion. And when you think about what does China bring to the market? It brings a lot of users, a potential lot of users, and it's not just the content, it's all the licensing deals downstream that this drives revenue. So sometimes when you give away the content for free, like the movie or like the show, what actually happens is all the back-end content and the back-end IP rights and distribution, that's where a lot of the money's made when people are looking at royalties and rights.
Especially for popular shows like House of Cards, and we know that China is producing its own version of House of Cards. How likely are we to see more domestic production in the future, or will it be more so these licensing deals that really increase more US content?
I think we're going to see a mix of both. Just like a lot of organizations started out by learning how Hollywood worked, today the movie production industry in China, the movie production industry in India, the movie production, these are pretty sophisticated engines of content creation. And now what we're seeing is really the ability to actually tailor a lot of these shows to the normalization tastes of what's happening in each of the countries, what's even happening in regions, and more importantly, what's happening in different populaces.
We'll certainly have to stay tuned and see how that develops. Thank you so much, Wang, founder and principal analyst at Constellation Research.